my analysis of what goes on in the United Kingdom is that many projects fail because nobody really decides what they're all about until they're too far down the track. And this is because they don't know how to start. In a board game, you throw a 6. And when you've thrown a 6, you can start. I don't think many people realise that. It's just the same with projects. And if you haven't thrown a 6, you don't know what you're doing. I use a language which I call the value agenda to try to get through to people that they need to know what they need, not necessarily what they want, and they need to do that by understanding what they value, not only the client who is paying, but all the people that they are trying to satisfy, both users of the project and the public authorities and the public around the thing, and the investors and all the others. Now, the built environment is all about life cycles, whereas projects tend to be drawn as lines. They really should be drawn as circles, because until the project is operating, you don't know whether you had it right, you don't know what you will do to modify it and change it as life goes on, and then how you will either demolish it or change it to meet changing requirements. The ideal would be if we had all these steps going round the cycle, connected into a knowledge base so that people knew what had been done and why it had been done, and they knew how to run a building on the basis of all the design information. But nobody does. The knowledge base in the middle is not there. So how does the built environment create value? Well, in lots of ways. Just to headline some of them, how well does the building actually help the occupier to do what they need to do? That's far and away the most important source of value. How much does it burden them with costs? That's the second most important thing. Is it an effective investment? Does it boost the value of the location in which it's placed? How does it talk about the owner, the occupier? What does it say to the people who use it and to those who pass by? And what are its social effects? Does it create well-being in its users and in the community? And what's its environmental impact? Positive, negative, bit of both? All sorts of messages about value. The process, how you actually get there. And that's in many ways what we're talking about at this meeting. Setting yourself up to make sure that once you know what you're trying to get, you can get it. Organising the client well. Ideally bringing everything to a focus of a single individual, but with all the other interests organised properly so nobody feels left out. Defining the vision. What's it all for and why? Choosing the procurement path. I don't know whether there's a Danish word for this, but we use this phrase meaning how are you going to buy? Choosing the right team. There's a separate 2-hour lecture on that. Using appropriate advanced methods. One of the phrases that goes around our industry is, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And there's tremendous conservatism about not changing the way we do things, but wanting to change the outcomes. I think Einstein said that if you do the same things and expect a different outcome, you're mad. The definition of madness. So the value proposition really is a new way of saying what we call the brief. I don't know what you call it, but what are the outcomes you require? We've moved on to the word outcomes recently because outputs is simply a statement of the physical square footage and technical performances you want to get. Outcomes is what do you want that to do? What do you want? How do you want the world changed by this? Which is a much more subtle and sophisticated thing, and means if you have to change your technical solution for some reason, you still know why you're doing that and what you're trying to get to. You'll be familiar with this graph. The longer you leave making a change, the less effect it's going to have and the more it's going to cost you. And at a certain point, changes are going to cost more than they save or deliver. And the sooner you start with your making the changes before you define the project, the better, because they'll be very much less costly to do. A firm I worked with for a period called E.C. Harris, who used to be called quantity surveyors and now call themselves built asset consultants. Just shows how the world is changing. They produced this phrase, rather like Chairman Mao: 4 optimizations. Optimize asset performance. What's it going to do for you? Optimize the operating cost. How's it going to burden you as you use it, and what's bearable? Then optimize the capital cost to achieve the first 2. Usually done the opposite way around. And finally, decide how the asset is going to be held. That's to say, do you own it, rent it, do you have it as a service supply, possibly with some outsourced services as well to animate the building. Lots of possibilities that, depending on what sort of an organisation it is. Basically, it all depends on evidence. Evidence is what we very rarely use in design. Design is far too instinctive. Data is not collected. It's not collected in a productive way. But if you can evaluate building performance once it's in use, you can derive value-based briefing. You can say, this is what we need and this is why we need it, and this is what it's worth spending on it to get it. And from that, you can also then do evidence-based design. The medical profession is really the only one which is well into this. They have evidence-based medicine now, and it seems, in fact, reasonable to them that you should have evidence-based design of a medical facility. And the research done so far suggests that the paybacks are quite enormous. That new hospital buildings, well considered, pay for themselves very, very quickly by shortening patient stays, reducing the amount of major drugs required to keep people comfortable. Quietness, for example, pays back enormously quickly. Privacy pays back. A good view pays back quickly, monetarily. The clever ones take a bit of money from the previous project and store it away to start the next one. But really, that shouldn't be necessary. The funding agency should understand that the first money is the best money. It's actually the most cost-effective of all of the money spent. Get rounded advice into that. Make sure that you're dealing with all of the issues and that you define your value proposition fully for all the stakeholders. Then set up the project to deliver that value proposition in use so that it gets there and is not frittered away by poor process. And then measure the outcomes. Join the feedback loop. Provide information for yourself and for all the others. You will have used some of that to define your project. Make sure that there is some stuff like that and that the next project can benefit. That whole idea of not knowing why you're doing things, but jolly well knowing what it costs, is really something we have to end. The things have got to be linked. Thank you very much.
Thank you.